It's fine. It's fine. I need to stop ranting. Hi guys, welcome back to another Nerd Rants video. Today we're going to be talking about a fairly short series that I watched in the last 2 months, I guess, called Pillars of the Earth. Maybe you've heard of it, maybe not. If you have heard of it, maybe you can feel free to comment below, just because I don't know. I don't know if anyone knows what the heck this is. Basically, this is a show telling the story about the building of the Kingsbridge Cathedral, and it's got Eddie Redmayne, who's Newt Scamander, in it, and the guy who plays Blackbeard in Pirates of the Caribbean on Stranger Tides. I don't remember the actor's name at the moment. It has Haley Atwell, I think that's right, but the actress for Peggy Carter. Who else is recognizable in it? It has, I don't know the actor's name, but the guy who plays Finnick Odair in The Hunger Games. It has him too. So it has a relatively well-known cast. I don't know how well-known they were when they made this series, because I didn't actually look at when this was released. I just watched it. Anyway, it's a very interesting series. It has a lot of, because the main plot, I guess, is following the people building the cathedral, but while all this is going on, there's also this battle of succession happening for the English throne, and so it's also got a lot of political intrigue and people scheming to gain power and whatever else. And so we have all of that going on and how that's affecting the building of the cathedral. And it's very interesting. Eddie Redmayne is, as always, is just great. And what I really liked, and I wish they had, I think, leaned a little bit more into, is throughout because he is the son of a woman who the church has deemed a witch. Not for it's. She doesn't actually do any witchcraft, but she curses people, I guess, with words more than actions or whatever. She's been labeled she's been labeled a witch by the church. And so she lives in the woods with her son, who is Jack. His name's Jack. And throughout the entire first episode, this entire 50-minute episode, and he's there from pretty much the beginning, he doesn't speak. He doesn't say anything. And they explain that his mom explains that he doesn't speak around strangers, because he's seen things that no child should, because his father was burned on a pyre in front of him when he was 1 or something. I don't know. I'm guessing based on his age, but based on what he looked like in the flashback scene. But yeah, and I loved it. I kind of loved this concept of he doesn't speak to people that he doesn't know. And going through that and having him having no lines in the first episode, and then in the second episode you finally hear him speak, and after that he kind of just starts talking to pretty much everyone, and so we lose that aspect of his character a little bit in the rest of the series, which is a little sad because I actually really liked that aspect of his character. It was kind of interesting, and so it's a little disappointing that we didn't get more of it. If he had been more willing to talk around this family that it centers around, who initiate the building of the cathedral, because he starts talking to them, and which makes sense. But if he had been a little more closed off with the other people that involved in the series a little bit longer, that would have been nice, but it's fine. It's not a huge deal, and it doesn't matter too much. I just thought it was something cool that they could have drawn out a little bit longer or used in certain situations a little bit more. Because by the end of the series, he's very much outspoken to pretty much everyone about things. And so it's such a flip, and we don't get to see a whole lot of that development, which is the really disappointing part, is it doesn't really seem to develop. It kind of just switches from one episode to the next. So that's kind of sad. But small thing. So yeah, we have Jack, who is, essentially the main character. Finnick Odair and Haley Atwell's characters are siblings of the former Lord of Shiring, yeah. And so in the first episode was a whole lot of setup, and you get introduced to all these characters, and the whole Battle of Succession is happening, where the former king's daughter has had a son, and so the king is trying to get the rest of the kingdom to back her until her son comes of age. And then his nephew is there, and he makes a deal with the church. That's another thing. So much corruption in the church. But anyway, makes a deal with the church or technically one guy in the church, who is very much a bad dude. But anyway, makes a deal with the church to make himself king. And so there's a whole battle of succession going on, and the Haley Atwell's, and who is Eliana, and then her brother Finnick Odair's character is Richard. So Eliana and Richard's father backs the daughter of the king, but she loses in the initial fight, and so their father is executed, and they're off to, essentially rebuild their lives, because now they have nothing, and their land has been given to, I don't remember, William Hamley and his parents. And so they've lost everything, and they're trying to rebuild. And then we have Jack and his mother, who find a family of builders, I guess. So we have Tom is the dad, and then we have his son Alfred and his daughter Martha. Yeah, Martha. So they lost their work that was supposed to go on for like a year or something, and so they're traveling through the woods trying to get to the next place where they can find work. His pregnant wife, gives birth and dies during that journey. Shortly after they meet Jack and his mom, who give them shelter through a storm, and then they move on, and she gives birth, and due to complications, she dies in the woods. And Tom, holding his new son in his arms, goes, we can't take care of him. And then leaves him on her grave going, I can't take care of him. It's better to just let him go be with his mother. And then a street bug who had mugged them earlier sees this and goes, what the heck? Basically has a come to Jesus moment, takes the baby and goes and becomes a monk of Kingsbridge. And then we have Jack and his mom travel with the remainder of Tom and his family to Kingsbridge, and they end up getting work to build a new cathedral. And so that's how all of this gets started, with all of these things happening. So there's a whole lot of moving parts to this, but in general, it's a very simple plot, because it's war for succession and then the building of the cathedral, and there's just a whole lot of things happening between those two plots. And they intertwine, and the war for succession brings complications to building of the cathedral, and the personal interests of then the bishop, who is the bad dude in the church who helps the king's nephew. So we have the personal interests and the plots of the bishop, and he is conspiring with the Hamley family, who are the Lords of Shiring, which is supposed to be by birthright Richard and Ariana's land. And so there's just all of these like sabotage and twisted plots and schemes and all of that for trying to, one, come out of the War for Succession on top, and two, for the bishop at least, to stop the Cathedral of Kingsbridge from being built. And so it's kind of an interesting and fun series, and all of these different plots and deception and sabotage and all of that. And yeah, and it's because the plots are so simple, there is a lot of parts. There's like a majority of it is a lot of being character driven, with just their connections with each other and their relationships and their disagreements. And we have a monk who's Philip, the main monk, and so we have him who is then like prior of Kingsbridge, and so he's kind of in charge of the monastery and all that. So he's in charge of building the cathedral, and so we have him butting heads with the bishop, who is Bishop Wetherin. Yeah, Wetherin. And so we have all of this happening, and underneath it all, there is this underlying plot that gets introduced in the first episode, and is kind of underlying and gets referenced throughout the rest of it, and then doesn't really come back and get resolved until the last episode, and that is the murder of the former king's only son, and the heir of the English throne, because he went down on a ship, and when they believed there were no survivors, but in reality the Hamleys and the now Bishop Wetherin did survive, and they murdered the then prince and his wife in order to orchestrate the king's nephew becoming king, because it was in their personal interest. And so this underlying plot is happening, and so we have this big thing. It's a big deal at the beginning because it sparks the War for Succession, and it's a big deal at the end because it's getting resolved and the secret is coming out, and so Wetherin and all of them that were involved are basically having justice dealt to them. But yeah, it's not the best show in the world. Just, I don't know, it's not necessarily the most enjoyable, but it is very good, and there's just a lot of good relationship dynamics and like manipulation and scheming and deception, and it's done very well. I will say probably my biggest pet peeve with it is the amount of explicit scenes that we get. Some of them are really unnecessary. Like, we don't need them. They used once or twice because Tom, who initiates the building of the cathedral, and then Jack's mom, after they meet, and then Tom's wife dies and all that, they end up in a romantic relationship. And sometimes they use them doing it as a transition scene, essentially, which was very much unnecessary. Like, why was this a choice? Why was this choice made? Why did we do it this way? It's not necessary. That's probably my biggest pet peeve with a whole lot of movies, is just the amount of explicit scenes. And because I don't understand why that's something people want to watch. Like, why do you want to see that? It's kind of gross as an outsider looking in, oh gosh, it's a whole nother rant coming, guys. I'm sorry. But why do we do this? When did we get it into our heads that watching something that is supposed to be this super intimate, super personal thing between two partners, between man and wife, and when did we get to the point where that is something that we want to advertise to everyone who watches a movie? or a show. Like, when did this happen? I don't know when this became acceptable or even normal, but it has, and I feel like I'm noticing it more and more. But of course, that's also because I'm getting older, so I'm allowed to watch more of these kinds of films and see it. But, like, seriously, why do we think this is okay? Christian or not, we all know that this is something very special. At least a majority of us view it with some level of, like, I don't know what word to use, but it's like we all treat it with this, at least for the most part, we all treat it with a certain level of importance, and it's ingrained in us that is something meant for, like, with your spouse. And I mean, all of these lines that I feel so strongly are getting blurred in modern society, like gender and sexuality and all of that is getting blurred in modern society. And so it's less surprising in things that are more modern, but for something that was made like 5 to 10 years ago, even, like, when did we decide? When did this line get blurred and this line get crossed? And then we decided, okay, it's just fine. That's the norm now. Because this is not something that we as an audience should be seeing. Like, this is not something you broadcast to an audience, because it's meant to be this super personal, super intimate thing. And I get in most of these scenes, it's them trying to portray that level of emotion, but that's not, if you have to show two people doing it in order for us to feel the level of emotion that they have in their relationship, you're probably not developing their relationship well. It probably means that you have to. And if you have to, then it's not a solid romance or a solid relationship if you have to show that to us. Like, I saw a piece of writing advice, and it was supposed to be funny, I think, but it's true. If your characters have to say I love you in order for people to know that they're in a relationship, then you're not writing the relationship right. And I feel like it's the same thing with, like, kissing and sex and all of that. Like, if they have to do those things in order for you to know that they are in a relationship and that they have that kind of emotion for each other, then you're really not displaying their relationship right. And you're not really showing that their relationship and their feelings are real. And a lot of times those scenes can easily be substituted with the implication that they're doing. Like, we're not stupid. If we're of the age that we're allowed to watch a movie with that kind of scene in it, then we're not stupid. And you can imply that something like that is happening without actually showing it, because we don't need to see that. No one needs to see that. It's not something for an outsider to watch. It's not. I'm sorry for my random rants. Like, I just have very strong feelings about things. And this is one of the first outlets I've found where it is easy for me to just, like, get my thoughts out there. So, yeah, to those who get offended by these kinds of rants, how unfortunate. It's unfortunate for you. But, yeah, I don't understand why we think this is okay. Because it's not even just like a Christian belief that this is supposed to be shared between the spouses, and that it's something that you... Sorry. I was trying to hold it back. We all understand on some level that, like, this is very important. This is serious. Like, when you cheat on someone, like, if you're in a situation in that kind of relationship, that married or not, but if you're in that situation and you find out they've been doing it with someone else, that they've been cheating on you, you freak out, you probably leave that person. The chances of you staying a couple or getting back together at some point are pretty low, I feel like, in most cases. Because we all know that this is a very big thing. And yet, yeah, like we all have an understanding of what sex means. We know what it means, and we know how important and how personal and how intimate it is. And yet we, or Hollywood, has chosen to just broadcast that in movies and shows and whatever to the general populace, because good television? Sure, I don't think so though. I personally don't agree with that being good television. If your story requires that to be considered good television, it's not good television, because it's... No. Sorry, I need to start ranting about this. So anyway, besides the excessive amount of explicit scenes, probably about 60 to 70% of which, probably closer to 80% of which, could have just been like implied and then move on. It was a very good show. Seriously. I can think of maybe two, maybe three of those scenes that actually added something to the story. Otherwise, they didn't. They never did. It was just to show. I feel like some of it was just to fill screen time, which you don't need a 15-minute episode. You really don't. As good as the show is, if you had cut it off a couple minutes early for a couple minutes or shorter for one of the episodes and avoided some of the explicit content, I would have been fine with that. Because I'm not really watching the explicit content anyway. And yeah, yep. It's fine. I need to stop ranting. Half of this video is just talking about that. Anyway. Yes. This is a very interesting show. If you like some into sort of a historical fiction show, and I don't know. It's a very interesting show, and if you're willing to either watch or skip a bunch of explicit content, it's worth a watch at least once, just because it's very interesting and the characters are good, and how they interact and their relationships and the dynamics between all of them are good. Yeah, and the Bishop Blethyn is just an absolute douche, and you're never rooting for him. Even before you see the full extent of his, corruption, you're never rooting for him. He's just an awful person. That's another thing. It does show kind of a cool contrast between, here's this super corrupt godly person, and here's the actually faithful, trying to be a good guy, a good Christian guy. And then we have the not necessarily considered, because this is all Catholic. So we have corrupt bishop, the faithful, good-hearted prior. We have the witch, who is a good person but is outcast from the church. And then we have families who are in the church and are horrible, partially because they're getting manipulated by the bishop, but also mostly because they're just crap people. Yeah, but it's also a very cool dynamic as well, just showing all of the facets of people both in and outside the church. We're not all necessarily great people. The church is not full of great people, which is kind of the point of the church. And the world is not full of crap people. Just because someone is not a Christian does not mean they're a crappy person, which Yeah. Fun contrast to have in a show. But yeah, I enjoyed the show. It was definitely worth at least the one watch through. Very intriguing seeing the dynamic of characters and how political strategies interacted with the religious side of the show. And of course, the architecture of the cathedrals is just great. I am very much a detail-oriented person, and so having any kind of architecture that is super detailed, super intricate, I go nuts for it. I love it. Yeah. So just having something centered on that, and Jack being like a sculptor and seeing the things that he creates and all that, yeah, it was very cool. I very much enjoyed it. If you're into that kind of story or whatever, or even if you're just very much into character-driven shows and whatever else, this is definitely a good one, at least to watch through once. And so yeah, those are my thoughts on Pillars of the Earth. If you've watched this already, which I don't know how many people have, feel free to comment your thoughts and put your thoughts in the comments as well. You could also drop any requests that you might have in there as well, songs, movies, whatever. Yeah, I post videos every Wednesday and Saturday, and I'll see you all next time.